Okay, let's try this again since this completely got foobarred last time. Give me just a second. Do this again. Get set up here. Alright. Now we're good. Now we're live and rolling. Cool. Finally. Alright, so anyway, we tried this a few minutes ago, about an hour ago, and just had computer problems. Ended up having to do a web conference anyway with someone. All right, so we're gonna try this again. This if you're just joining, you didn't see this first attempt at this live stream. We're just gonna get started with the Symfony PHP framework today. What is a Symfony PHP framework? It's a full-featured web application framework that you would build, that you use to build your own web apps. Your own web apps, your own web APIs, things like that. Symfony is a full-featured framework. There are other PHP frameworks like Laravel, Zend, Yi, I think is another one. But there are quite a few. But for this, for this live stream, we just want to, we want to help you get Symfony, installed, and try and stand up our first web app. So yeah, let's get started. So I think, the first thing you're going to need is you need to make sure that you have PHP installed on your computer, and if you're Mac, I'd recommend doing that with Homebrew. So you can install, a specific version of PHP if you want, or the most recent version of PHP. I think I'm running, I'm currently running 7.4.3, which I think is a 1 dot release behind the most recent version. Linux, if you're running Linux, your package manager on Linux ought to be able to install PHP for you. And on Windows, I've not done development on Windows. I've always been a Linux and Mac guy, but I know there are plenty of tutorials out there for getting started. But anyway, okay, we have. So I got this project started up in PHP Storm, which is a development environment for PHP from the JetBrains folks. They do a lot of IDEs. And they're pretty slick. They're really good. They provide a lot of features, and we'll see a lot of those features as we kind of get started with the project here. Okay, so if you have PHP installed already, you'll want to install Composer, which is the PHP package manager. Let's see, getting started. A couple links in here off the Symfony page, symfony.com, symfony.com. So you want to make sure you have Composer installed. You want to make sure that you download the Symfony installer, the binary for Symfony that lets you create new applications. So once you have those installed, Symfony ought to be available on your command line globally. And so inside of this new project that I've created, I just started this off with my top level directory for this project is just Symfony, and then I'm going to install Symfony inside of a subdirectory called lib, and that'll make sense why I do that later. So let's see. Oh, installing a version of Symfony. So you can install different versions of Symfony, right? You can install the most recent version of Symfony that's being developed currently on master, which is Symfony 5. You can install the long-term support version of Symfony. So with Symfony, they support different versions for longer periods of time. Let me see if I can find that here. So the long-term support you get bug fixes for 3 years, security issues fixed for 4 years. Whereas like a standard version, if we just install the most recent version, which is 5, you'll get 8 months of support for either one of those. When I'm starting a new project for a client or for myself, I'm usually starting with the long-term support version. So that's what I'm going to use today, and that's going to end up installing Symfony 4.4, I think. Yeah, here are the LTS versions, long-term support versions. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to install, I'm not even going to copy and paste that. I can just type it in. So once we have PHP installed, we have Composer installed, we have the Symfony binary installed. All that can be found, all those can be found on the Symfony.com website. Then we're gonna create the project itself. So we're going to use that Symfony installer, that Symfony binary, and do Symfony new lib, and we are going to do the long-term support version. So that'll take a couple minutes to install the Symfony skeleton app, and we'll just wait a few minutes while that goes. All right, I think it's done. Sweet. So the Symfony binary also comes with a built-in PHP server that you can run, and which will start up a server for your app on your local machine. All right, so we have our browser here on the right side here, pretty small, minimized for the most part. But inside of our project directory, inside of the project root for the Symfony project root, we can run Symfony server :start. That's going to boot up our application, and then we can go to our browser and go to localhost port 8000, and boom, there is the application running on our local machine. So we're using localhost port 8000. That's what the server is running on, and that's our Symfony application. We can refresh it, and it kind of has this little cool effect where it's just like a different color, different hue each time. You can notice the message right at the top. So we're seeing this because we haven't configured a home page yet. So let's go back. Let's go check out our code real quick. And I hope this is big enough. I think it's big enough on the preview if you look at an HD. But in our project tree here on the left, you can see what the installer gave us. Right, we installed it under lib. Right, we get our binary directory, which has our console. We'll talk about that in a little bit. We have some config stuff. Public, everything under public is exposed by the web server, so it's public. Anything we put under there would be accessible when we deploy the site, deploy the application. So you gotta be careful about what you put in there. Source is where the majority of our application or our source code is going to live. Most of the changes that we make will be in here. Var is where things like cache and log are stored. And then vendor is all of our dependencies, our PHP dependencies that get installed when we run Composer. When we do Composer require this or Composer require that, it installs all the dependencies, and they're installed under vendor. And then really our kernel, which boots up our whole application, it lives under source, but from our public index.php, you'll see here that let's see, where's the kernel? Yeah, our kernel is getting initialized in index.php, which index.php is what is our what do we call it, a point of entry, or our entry into the application, right? So we're running, when we hit it up in the browser, index.php is what's being run and rendered. So it boots the kernel, loads the kernel, and then the rest of the app is loaded, and the response is rendered in the browser. That's kind of a basic walkthrough through a base skeleton Symfony application. Okay, so that being said, right now we have not much. We have installed 4.4.6 and we're running it on our Symfony server with our Symfony server command start, Symfony server start, and it's running here. But we don't have any routes set up, right? Or what is a route? A route translates, or it maps the URL to the controller action in Symfony. Well, what's a controller? Well, we're going to jump into that next. Let's actually create a default controller. If you're not familiar with the model view controller architecture of web applications, a quick overview is that our data lives in this MVC, right? Is the name of the architecture. Our data, or access to our data, lives in the model. We have our view, which in our, in Symfony's case is the templates, and we have our controllers. Our URLs will route to controllers. Our controllers will access the model, fetch all the data, interface with the model, get the data, put the data, persist the data, and then it'll render a view. So let's create our first. Let's get rid of our default page here, or default home page, and create one. Create a replacement for it. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is we're going to create. Actually, let me make sure we have. Let's do a default controller. Create a new controller. Default controller.php. We're using PHP 7.4, so we're going to put our strict types on. We have to get a namespace, and our controller is going to live in app controller. That's the namespace for our controllers. Our namespacing is a way to segregate your code so that you don't have collisions with the names of your classes. All right, so we're going to have a default controller class, and we're going to extend our abstract controller, which I don't think is even installed yet. So because this is like a skeleton application, we don't even have an abstract controller well, unless I just spelled it wrong. Maybe I spelled it wrong. That happens. Extends abstract. Yeah, there it is. Okay, there we go. So we're going to extend the abstract controller that Symfony provides for us, and we are going to need to be able to. Okay, let's try this anyway. All right, so we're gonna provide a method. Jeez, come on, hands! It's late on Friday. I cannot type. Come on, goodness. Okay. Here we go. Alright, so we have a default controller, we have our index method, which is an action. We have our controller, we have our controller actions. Index is a controller action. We can name that whatever we want. And for this particular controller action, this will be our default controller action. All we're going to do is return a new response object. It says hello world, because this is programming, and everything you do, every first project you do has to be a hello world project, and this shouldn't do anything right now. And the reason it doesn't do anything is we haven't told our application that we want this URL to map to this controller action index. We haven't done that yet. We need to tell the application, hey, we want this URL. When this URL is requested, we want this controller action to handle the request. We haven't done that yet. Okay, we've only set up a controller and an action, but it has no idea that we want that particular URL to map to this controller action. So let's do that first. What we're going to need to do is install something though, using Composer. Let me find what we need to install. I can't remember off the top of my head. Okay, well, we're going to install our route annotations. And we'll see what that means in just a second. So in our lib directory, we have Symfony installed. We're going to do, oh man, it's late on Friday. All right, composer require annotations. And we'll see what that means in just a second. Yeah, okay, good, that's installed. Okay, so that package, that composer package, or that PHP package, that dependency, gives us a route annotation that we can use in our code. So we have to essentially import the route class that we want to use. In this case, it's an annotation. What does that mean? Well, in PHP, we can provide annotations, or PHP doc. So this is like metadata about the code, right? So it's like / star, and then we have this @return response. That just tells the IDE that we're expecting this function down here to return a response object, right? So we can generate PHP docs, PHP documentation for our code based on these annotations. We can also provide configuration options in the annotations, or configuration in the annotation. How do we do that? Well, in this particular case with route, we can say @route, give it a path parameter, and we're just going to say /, right? That's the root of our application, and we're just going to close paren there. Now, what this does is it tells the application that this path here, this URL, this path, we can call it a path for now, it's path. It's not a full URL. This is a path, maps to this controller action index. And it doesn't matter what this is called. That's really for our benefit. There is a convention though, and we'll talk more about that later. Now that we have path, our root, the root of our application, the root of our web app will map to the index controller action here. So when we reload this page, it's going to return a new response with the content of hello world. No HTML or anything like that. It's just going to be a text response. It may be, I'll have to look and see if it's actually HTML, but I think it's just a text response. And she'll just say hello world in the browser. So if we reload, that's exactly what we get. We get hello world in the browser. Right? So that's our first controller action. We'll return a response of hello world. We can do more than that. Every controller action has to return a response. That's the idea. It needs to return a response object. That's what every controller action is expected to do here. It doesn't have to be a plain response object. It can be a JSON response. And we can pass in an array. There's a bug flying around because I have my windows open. Alright, do JSON response. And we get JSON returned. And that also will return the correct header as well. That should have given us, if we look at our headers here, that should have given us, yeah, an application / JSON content type. So the browser knows what to do with it. So yeah, we just have to return some response object. JSON response extends the functionality of the base response class. Cool. So that's that. I mean, that's your first controller action, and the first, the first response, that we've set up here. Let's go back to hello world. Alright, so that's just hello world. We can name this whatever. Doesn't matter because it knows this annotation is connected. You know, is for this method. In this case, the method name does not matter. When I'm doing like a root URL like this, or if it's something like clients, right, or it's stores, or it's notes, you know, kind of like the root of that resource. Usually we'll use the word index for that controller action. Yeah. All right, so we're just gonna just returning a plain old response, plain text response, and let's be good with our code here. I mean, we know that it's going to return response, but we can be especially good there with our return types since we're using 7.4. It's sort of implied, but okay. So yeah, that's getting started with our first controller action. But let's take it to the next level. Let's return some actual HTML rather than just some plain text, because this isn't going to do much. If we're doing like a server-side rendered web application, this isn't really going to help us out that much. So let's figure out how we can render an actual template, an actual view with some actual HTML in it. Good Lord, let me turn on some background music because this is quiet over here. Let's see. Nope. Alright, let's get something going now. Okay, so Symfony provides a templating engine that you can use to render your views. Right? It's called Twig. Twig is the name of the templating engine. We can find some documentation on Twig. There's plenty of good documentation on Twig. Twig.symfony.com has all the documentation you need for Twig. And they give you good instructions. You know, they give you good documentation for getting it installed and up and running. I can show you how to do that real quick, though. It doesn't take too long. So we'll do again back under lib. We're going to do composer require twig. And that will install the templating engine, the Twig templating engine that we needed to actually use our templates and create our brace and proper view. So you can see it gave us this templates directory here with a base template. So let's talk about Twig a little bit. Twig has a pretty cool inheritance model with templates. It's pretty neat the way it's set up. So this is our base Twig template that Symfony gives us. And you can see these predefined blocks. Here we've got block title, and then in the middle of it says welcome, and end block, right? Block style sheets, which is a special block, not a special block, but we'll see how to make use of that later. Then end block and block body and end block, right? We have block body, we have body block, style sheets, title, with a default value for title here called welcome. So if we refresh, well, not yet. So yeah, so check this out. So what we can do is we have this base.html.twig template. Here in our controller action, rather than just returning a response directly, we can return a response via this this method that's provided by the abstract controller, this render method. In it, we can pass in the name of our base template, which is base.html.twig. And inside of our base.html.twig file, inside of body, we can say hello world. Right, nothing changes here in the browser because it's not really that obvious. Hello Symfony world. How about that? Yeah, there we go. Right. So now we're telling, for a response, render still returns, like it returns a response object for us. It's doing that for us. So what render does for us is it'll take in the string name of a template, and render the results of that template, right? But for convention, we don't typically use our base template that way. What we do is, what I typically do, I think the documentation even suggests this, is I will extend our base template, kind of like an inheritance model, right? So we'll create a new template called default.html.twig. And what we'll say extends base.html.twig. Right? And remember these handy little blocks that our base template gives us? Block, or body block, JavaScripts, and so on. When our default template that we're extending, we're extending the base template. In our default template, we can override those blocks. So we can say block body and when we override that block, whatever is in this block will override whatever is in its parent block, right? So now we'll say hello. Oh, we don't have that. We don't have that right in the default controller. We need to change our change which template we're using. Now we're using default. Default. Right? Hello, Symfony. Right. We can look at this page source. We can see the HTML that's being rendered. Right, so we have our doc type, HTML head, body. We have our body block right here, but in our default template, which is the one we're using, we're overriding the contents of our body block in base. Right, which is pretty slick. That's a pretty neat feature. We can even say, look at our title tag right now. Our title tag up here says welcome, right? That's because here in the base template, we have our title block, and we have our default value for our title block, which is welcome. So that's why it says welcome up there, because we didn't override that in default, but we're going to. So now we can say block title, this, or just call it a Symfony application. Right? And our title tag changed in the tab because we overrode that block in default. Our default extends base. That provides us the title block, and we overrode the default value, which is pretty slick. So for a page that's like stores or whatever, you could have stores at the top, but for a single store, you could have the name of the store. All right. So that's our second tier. It's our second tier template, right? Typically, we always have a base, always have a default. But for the individual actions, for the individual routes, I usually will have a template set up. And the naming convention I like to use is to set up essentially a lowercase version of the controller name. So we have default controller. So here I'm just going to do default. Create a directory default under templates, and then I'm going to create essentially a template that matches my controller action, which is index. So I'm going to do index.html.twig. So you can see, again, how what that convention is looking like. We have our default controller, so I have a default directory under templates, lowercase. And I have an index controller action, so I have an index template name. Index is the name of the template. Alright, so again, we're going to extend, not base this time, but we're going to extend default. And I think we'll see later why that's important. So we'll get back to that when we add some styles. Okay. So we have base. We have our base. Default extends base. Index extends default.html.twig. Now, something I didn't mention before is that if we don't provide any sort of, well, I guess that doesn't matter. Let's do that. Let's say block body. Let's get it back to Hello Symfony. And let's render in here rather than our default. We're going to do this. I'm going to say default / index.html.twig. So it knows to use the templates directory as the default directory, or as the base directory for our templates, and then we'll just provide it the path, the relative path to the template we want to render. So default index.html.twig. Now in here you might think, okay, well we didn't override the body block of our parent default, so it shouldn't render anything, right? Let's refresh and see what happens. Nope, it renders Hello Symfony. The reason is, our base template provides us the body block, but look, default body block. We provide a value of Hello Symfony here in the default, which is extended by index, but index does not override our body block. So whatever its parent was is rendered by default. Right? I hope that makes sense. Since we're not rendering the body block here in index, whatever is in its parent is what's going to be rendered by default, and it'll go all the way up to its grandparent or higher if needed. All right, but we can in our index override the body one more time. We'll say this is our home page route, and we should see that now because we're overriding the body block of default, or overriding the body block that's provided to us by base. All right. So that's what we're rendering now, and that's our template now. That's the template we would use for this path, our home page, right? For now, we're just gonna leave that blank, essentially, except for extending base, and then we'll do that. And let's also add block home page. Oops, and block. Sweet. All right, so that should change our title tag to home page. This is our home page route, or we could just say this is our home page. Yay, this is our home page default. And that's how we render our first template. That's pretty cool, huh? All right, so let's change that to H1. And we'll kind of get the H1 tag there. We look at the page source, not inspect. Yeah, we get an H1 there for our title tag. All right. So I mean that's kind of getting started here. That's a good first start, I think, for this little video, for this live stream. I think the next time I jump in here, we'll do some tests. We'll add a test for this page. Testing is very important. We can't neglect our tests. We want to start with tests early on, get into the habit of writing good tests. So the next time I jump on here for the live stream, we'll start talking about some testing, and then we'll get into some more advanced more advanced features of Symfony. But yeah, so until next time, take care. If you wanna know when the next live stream is, follow me on Twitter. It's at JasonPancake on Twitter. So follow me there on Twitter, and I'll usually post the live stream link there, or follow me here on YouTube as well. And I'll try and do this pretty regularly. We'll give it a shot and see how it goes. But anyway, take care. I hope to see you around and participating in the chat next time. Talk to you soon. Take care.